Welcome back, everybody. Today we're tackling a really interesting challenge.
Yeah.
How do we deal with all the different religions and cultures out there in a way that's fair to everyone, keeps society from falling apart, and avoids turning into a shouting match?
Right.
Tricky, right? So, to guide us, we're going to look at the teachings of the Bahá'í Faith.
Okay.
And just to be clear, this isn't about converting anyone.
No.
It's about seeing what practical wisdom we can pick up from their approach.
What I find fascinating about the Baha'i perspective is this. They really champion individual freedom,
Yeah.
but at the same time, they stress how important harmony is. That's a tightrope walk, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Trying to balance those two.
Yeah, well, and one of the big challenges that jumps out from our source material is this. What happens when a religious group tries to force their beliefs on everyone else?
Ah, yeah.
You know, some pretty intense examples came up, like certain Muslim groups labeling people of other faiths as infidels,
Okay.
or religious leaders actually calling for uprisings against governments they don't like.
Yeah, I see.
It kind of makes you wonder, where do we draw the line?
Yeah.
How do we respect religious freedom, but also stop one group from calling all the shots?
Well, the Baha'i teachings are pretty clear on this. Strict separation of religion and state. They believe religion should unite, not divide.
Okay.
So the government should be guided by spiritual values, ones that resonate with all of humanity,
Yeah,
but not by the specific doctrines of any one religion.
I see.
So think of it as a government that's fair to everyone, no matter what you believe.
So no theocracies.
Nope.
All right, that makes sense.
Right.
But even if you avoid that, how do you actually bridge the gap between different faiths?
Yeah.
You know, one thing the source material mentioned was interfaith councils,
Okay.
where people can sit down respectfully and discuss their differences.
Right.
And they brought up this really powerful example of the Baha'is in Iran.
Oh, yeah.
They face intense persecution there. But even so, they've stuck to peaceful solutions instead of fighting back.
It really shows their commitment to nonviolence.
It does.
And to be practical, legal frameworks are key too, right?
Yeah.
So the Baha'i Faith supports free speech? Absolutely.
Okay.
But there's this crucial caveat.
Which is?
You can't use free speech to incite harm
Oh.
or try to break down the unity of society.
So it's like, yes, you have the freedom to believe what you want, but if your beliefs lead you to actions that hurt others,
Yeah,
society can't just stand by and let that happen.
right. That's a tough question.
It is. All right, let's shift gears. Another tough challenge from the source material. Racist and supremacist groups. They specifically mention neo-Nazi groups.
Okay.
And these groups, they're rooted in such intense hate. It's hard to know where to even begin.
Well, the Baha'i teachings have an answer that's actually quite straightforward.
Okay.
Education.
Education.
They see racism as stemming from ignorance. So they say we need to start young, teaching about the oneness of humanity
Interesting.
and celebrating the contributions of all the different cultures out there.
So it's like, if we grow up learning to see the shared humanity in everyone, regardless of background, then maybe as adults, we'd be less prone to things like racial profiling or implicit bias.
Possibly, yeah.
It makes you think, though, these prejudices, they can get so deeply ingrained.
They can.
And what about when hate speech turns into actual violence? What do the Baha'i teachings say about that?
They are very clear. Strong legal consequences for both.
So both hate speech and hate-motivated violence.
Exactly.
That's like, okay, individual beliefs are valuable,
Right.
but actions that hurt others or actions that threaten the very fabric of society, those are unacceptable.
Yeah.
It raises a big question, though.
What's that?
In a truly just society, where do individual rights end and the collective good begin?
Oh, that's a question for the ages, isn't it?
It is. And here's where things get really interesting. And this is straight from the source material.
Okay.
It talks about Baha'is in the United States working on these race unity projects,
Oh, interesting.
bringing diverse communities together for dialogue and real action.
So it's not just talk.
No, it's about rolling up your sleeves and working together.
Side by side.
Exactly. Okay, now let's move on to a challenge that's super nuanced. When cultural or religious practices clash with safety concerns.
Oh, good.
The source material brought up the debate over the hijab as an example. So on one hand, some people see the hijab as a security risk,
Right.
but for others, it's an essential part of their faith.
I see. So how do you find a solution that respects everyone?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
It is.
The Baha'i teachings offer this interesting perspective.
Okay.
They focus on the spiritual intention behind modesty rather than dictating what people should wear.
I see.
So they support individual choice,
Okay.
as long as it doesn't cause harm to society.
So you could have a policy that permits the hijab, but still addresses specific safety concerns through dialogue.
And through creative solutions, I guess.
Yeah, I guess
Like
so.
maybe there are certain situations where identification is necessary, but it could be done in a way that still respects the individual's beliefs.
Right.
So it's about finding that middle ground
Yeah, balance.
where individual rights and the needs of society can coexist.
Yeah.
The source material also talked about encouraging integration,
Okay.
but without forcing people to abandon their culture.
Right.
And they mentioned interfaith councils in Europe, working to build understanding around the hijab issue.
So again, it comes back to communication.
Yeah, open and honest communication seems to be a recurring theme.
Absolutely.
Now, here's a challenge that might hit close to home for some listeners.
Okay.
Should governments allow preachers from any religion to come in and freely spread their message?
That's a big one.
It is.
It really makes you think about where you stand.
Yeah, where do you draw the line?
Well, the Baha'i Faith believes in freedom of belief,
Okay.
but they also stress the importance of responsibility.
Ah, okay.
So religious leaders should be free to guide their followers, but not if their teachings incite hatred or disrupt the harmony of society.
I see.
It's a balancing act, for sure.
It is.
They suggest that governments consult with religious leaders from different faiths,
Okay.
but at the same time, maintain a secular system of governance.
So it's about creating a space for diverse voices,
Yes.
but making sure no one group can hijack the system
Right.
for their own agenda.
Exactly.
And get this, there's this powerful quote from Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i Faith.
Okay.
It's in the source material.
Oh, what does he say?
He said, "Religion should be the cause of unity. If it becomes the cause of division, it is better to do without it."
Wow, he doesn't mince words, does he?
He doesn't. And that leads us to the big overarching challenge, the one that ties everything together.
We'll do that.
How do we maintain law and order, ensure everyone's safety, and uphold justice when you've got all these different beliefs and practices in the mix?
Yeah.
That's the ultimate goal, right?
It is. It's like trying to conduct an orchestra where everyone's playing a different instrument.
Uh-huh. I like that.
But somehow, it still has to sound harmonious.
That's a great analogy. So, what does the Baha'i Faith offer as a way to approach this?
Well, they emphasize clear, universal laws, consistently applied.
So, no matter who you are,
Exactly.
everyone's equal before the law.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
And they put a huge emphasis on consultation
Consultation.
when it comes to making decisions.
So, bringing diverse voices to the table
Yeah.
and finding solutions that work for the common good.
That's it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And here's where it gets even more intriguing.
Oh, I love it when you say that. What's fascinating us this time?
Well, the Baha'i Faith actually envisions a future system of global governance.
Global governance.
Yeah.
Like worldwide. Whoa.
One that transcends national and cultural borders.
That's a huge concept.
It is.
But also seems incredibly complex.
It is, for sure.
I mean, we struggle to get along with our own countries,
Uh-huh.
let alone on a global scale.
Well, that's a conversation for another deep dive, perhaps.
Fair enough.
But it does highlight the Baha'i belief in the ultimate unity of humankind. They don't see this as some far-off utopia.
No.
No, they see it as an inevitable stage in our collective evolution.
Interesting.
It makes you wonder, though, what small steps can we take today
Yeah.
in our own lives, in our own communities, that might contribute to this larger vision of unity and cooperation?
Food for thought, for sure. So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
We've looked at how the Baha'i Faith tackles some of the biggest hurdles we face in a diverse society, separating religion and state,
Right.
championing education and interfaith dialogue,
Yeah.
advocating for the equality of women, and even daring to imagine a system of global governance.
It's a framework for navigating a pretty complex world, wouldn't you say?
It is.
And it raises some crucial questions for our listeners to ponder.
What do you mean?
Well, what stood out to you most from what we've discussed? And how might these Baha'i principles apply to your own life, your community, or even on a global scale?
So much to think about. We'll be back soon for part 2 of this deep dive,
Looking forward to it.
where we'll explore these ideas even further. Until then, keep those brain gears turning.
Definitely. Welcome back to our deep dive, folks.
Back into figuring out how to live together peacefully, even with all our differences.
Exactly. And last time we ended on that mind-blowing Baha'i concept of global governance.
I know, it's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is, for sure.
So how do you actually balance universal human rights with respecting all the different cultures out there?
It's a tough one, no doubt.
Seems almost impossible, really.
It's a delicate balance, for sure.
Like, how do you make sure everyone's treated fairly, but also acknowledge that different societies have different ways of doing things?
Well, the Baha'i teachings offer a really interesting perspective here.
Okay, I'm listening.
They actually believe that diversity is a strength, not a weakness.
That's not how most people see it, though.
I know, it's a different way of thinking.
It is.
But think about it this way.
Okay.
It's like a garden.
Okay.
With all kinds of flowers.
All right.
Each one beautiful and unique in its own way.
Yeah.
But all of them together, they create this incredibly beautiful whole.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. So it's about embracing all those different colors, those different perspectives, those different ways of being.
And seeing the beauty in that tapestry of humanity.
Exactly.
Instead of trying to make everyone conform to one single mold.
And the Baha'i teachings are super clear on this. Unity doesn't mean uniformity.
Interesting.
It's about figuring out how to live together harmoniously, even though we have all these differences.
And respecting each other despite those differences.
And it all boils down to this: recognizing the inherent dignity and worth of every single person on this planet.
It's like shifting from that us versus them mentality to a we're all in this together kind of approach.
Exactly.
Which, let's be real, that's easier said than done.
Oh, for sure. It's a challenge, no doubt.
Especially when you're dealing with like religious or cultural practices that clash with your own values.
Oh, absolutely.
It can be tough to find that common ground.
And that's where this Baha'i principle of consultation comes in.
Consultation.
Yeah, think of it as a structured dialogue, a way of talking to each other.
Okay.
And the Baha'i writings, they go beyond just saying, talk to each other.
Right.
They give specific guidelines for how to actually conduct consultations effectively.
So it's not just like a free-for-all.
No.
There's a structure to it, a process.
Exactly.
Okay, so what are some of those guidelines?
Well, they emphasize really listening to each other.
That's a good one.
And speaking with respect.
Yeah, that seems crucial.
And being willing to let go of your own ego.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
I know, right? But the idea is to focus on the greater good, not just your own personal agenda.
So it's about finding solutions that work for everyone, not just for yourself or your group.
Precisely.
Okay, I like that.
And they also emphasize the importance of detaching from your own ideas.
Interesting.
So you don't become so fixated on your own perspective that you can't see the value in other people's ideas.
Makes sense.
And, you know, the Baha'i community, they actually practice this regularly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they have these gatherings where they use consultation to discuss community matters, to make decisions, even to elect their leaders.
Wow, so it's not just a theory, they're actually putting it into practice.
Exactly, they're living it out.
That's impressive. Now, speaking of dialogue, the source material talked a lot about interfaith dialogue.
Oh yeah, that's something the Baha'i Faith really emphasizes.
They do.
And, you know, they have this beautiful way of explaining it.
How's that?
They say that different religions are like different paths.
Yeah.
Leading up the same mountain.
Oh, I like that.
So even though we might be taking different routes, we're all ultimately aiming for the same goal.
Which is?
Spiritual growth, understanding the true nature of reality, connecting with the divine.
However you want to phrase it.
Yeah, exactly. The point is, we have way more in common than we often realize.
And by focusing on those commonalities, maybe we can start to build those bridges of understanding and respect.
Instead of getting hung up on the differences.
Right. It's about choosing to focus on what unites us rather than what divides us.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
And, you know, the Baha'i Faith, they actually encourage their followers to engage in interfaith dialogue. Yeah, and not with the goal of converting people. No, but rather with the goal of learning from each other.
Interesting.
To really appreciate the beauty and the wisdom that's found in all those different faith traditions.
So it's less about my religion is better than yours and more about let's share our insights and see what we can learn from each other.
Exactly.
I love that approach.
It's a powerful way to break down prejudices and create that spirit of unity.
It reminds me of that saying, travel broadens the mind.
Oh, I like that.
But in this case, it's about traveling across different religious landscapes
Yeah.
to better understand spirituality and what it means to be human.
And speaking of travel,
Yes.
the source material also mentioned that the Baha'i Faith puts a big emphasis on actually traveling to different countries.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and experiencing different cultures firsthand.
Why is that?
Well, they believe that exposure to different cultures broadens our perspectives.
Okay.
It helps us to appreciate the richness and diversity of human experience,
I can see that.
and it challenges our assumptions about the other.
Yeah, it forces you to step outside your comfort zone.
Exactly, and to see our common humanity.
And hopefully to break down some of those stereotypes and misconceptions.
Exactly, those things that often lead to prejudice and conflict.
So Baha'is are encouraged to travel, to learn new languages, to immerse themselves in other cultures.
Yeah, they see it as a vital part of their spiritual growth.
It's like a global citizenship program built right into their faith.
In a way, yes, they see themselves as citizens of the world,
Wow.
committed to creating a global society based on unity, justice, and peace.
That's a lofty goal,
Is.
but also incredibly inspiring.
It is, and they believe that global citizenship
Yeah.
is not just some nice ideal.
No.
No, they see it as a necessity in our interconnected world.
I mean, it makes sense when you think about it.
It does.
We're all so interconnected now.
Oh, yeah.
What happens in one part of the world affects everyone else.
Exactly.
So it makes sense that we need to start thinking and acting like global citizens. Okay, so that's global citizenship. What about all those other big ideas we were talking about?
Like,
Transforming institutions, working for social justice, those big systemic changes.
yes. Well, the Baha'i teachings actually offer a pretty practical framework for how we can think about creating that kind of positive change on a societal level.
Okay, I'm all ears.
They believe that social transformation happens in stages.
Stages.
Yeah, it's not about trying to change everything overnight.
Right, that's not realistic.
No, it's about taking those small, incremental steps towards a more just and equitable society.
So it's like building a house brick by brick, one step at a time.
Exactly. And they've identified 3 key areas where this transformation needs to happen:
Okay, what are they?
the individual, the community, and the institutions of society.
Okay, let's break that down.
Sure.
Starting with the individual level,
Mm-hmm.
what does transformation look like?
It's about personal transformation,
Okay.
about consciously developing those spiritual qualities that are essential for building a better world,
Like what?
like love, compassion, trustworthiness, justice, generosity, humility.
Okay, yeah, those are all good qualities.
They are. And it's about working on ourselves, becoming the kind of people who naturally contribute to the well-being of others.
So it starts with looking inward.
Exactly.
If we want to create a more just and peaceful world, we have to start with ourselves.
And aligning our actions with our network.
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. Because ultimately, social change starts with individual change.
Makes sense.
And it's a lifelong process for sure.
It is.
But the Baha'i teachings offer a lot of guidance on how to navigate this path of personal growth.
Okay, so that's the individual. What about the community level? What does social transformation look like in that context?
Think about creating communities that are characterized by unity,
Okay.
cooperation, and service to others.
So communities where people from different backgrounds can come together,
Yeah.
work together to solve problems and support each other.
Exactly. And the Baha'i Faith actually has a long history of community building initiatives.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they have study circles, devotional gatherings, and service projects.
And are these just for Baha'is?
No, they welcome people of all backgrounds to join in.
So they're really putting that idea of building unity and diversity into practice.
They are, and they believe that by creating these little pockets of unity and cooperation, it can hopefully spread outwards and influence wider society.
It's like a ripple effect.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So that's the individual and the community level. But what about that third level, transforming the institutions of society?
Ah, yes, that's the big one.
It is, because we're talking about systems of governance, education, healthcare, economics.
Yeah, the big stuff.
And the Baha'i teachings are pretty clear that these institutions need to evolve
They do.
if we want to create a more just and equitable world.
So it's not enough to just focus on personal and community change.
Right.
We also need to address the systems.
The systems that perpetuate injustice and inequality.
Exactly.
It's about looking at the root causes.
And the Baha'i writings offer some specific principles to guide this process.
Like what?
Well, they emphasize justice, consultation, and eliminating all forms of prejudice.
And they believe in a world where everyone has equal opportunities.
Yeah, regardless of their background, their race, their religion, their gender, their anything.
That's a tall order considering the state of the world today.
It is, no doubt about it.
But it all goes back to that belief in our shared humanity.
It does.
And recognizing the inherent dignity and worth of every single person.
Exactly.
So what would those systems look like in practice?
Well, that's where we'll pick things up in part 3 of this deep dive.
Oh, you're going to leave us hanging.
I am.
All right, well, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
You will?
Stay tuned, folks. We'll be back soon with the final part of our exploration. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Glad to be back.
We've been talking about these huge, kind of mind-blowing ideas, you know.
Global governance, transforming institutions.
Yeah, exactly. It's inspiring, but it's easy to get lost in the clouds, you know.
I know what you mean.
Like, how do we actually put this stuff into practice?
Ah, good point.
So in part 2, you mentioned that the Baha'i community is out there actually doing this work.
Absolutely.
Not just talking about it.
They're walking the walk.
Okay, so give me some concrete examples.
What are they doing to make a difference in the real world?
All ears.
One area where they've been super active is promoting race unity.
Oh, yeah, we touched on that earlier.
With their work on those projects in the United States.
Right.
But there are so many other examples.
Tell me more. I'm really curious how they're approaching this.
Well, one powerful example comes from South Africa during apartheid.
Oh, wow. That was a really tough time.
It was. And despite facing their own persecution.
Wait, the Baha'i community was persecuted too?
They were, yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize.
But even in that situation, they refused to be divided along racial lines.
That's powerful.
They held integrated meetings and events, even when it was illegal.
So they were putting their principles into practice.
Yeah, even when it meant putting themselves at risk.
That's a real testament to their commitment.
It is. It shows that they really believe in this.
Yeah, because it's one thing to talk about unity, but it's another thing to actually live it out in a situation like that.
Especially in such a challenging context.
Exactly.
And their work in South Africa didn't stop there.
Oh, what else did they do?
Once apartheid ended, they set up schools and community centers that served people of all races.
And they kept pushing for dialogue and understanding between different racial groups. So they were really committed to building a more just and equitable society.
They were, yeah.
And their work in South Africa is just one example, right?
It is. They're doing similar work all over the world.
Give me another example.
Well, in the United States, they've been actively supporting the Black Lives Matter movement.
Okay.
And working to dismantle systemic racism.
That's so important.
It is, given the ongoing struggles for racial justice.
Yeah, it's not an issue that's just going to disappear overnight.
And for the Baha'i community, it's not just about protests or policy changes.
No.
They believe in building genuine relationships, fostering understanding, and creating a culture of unity and respect.
So it's about changing hearts and minds.
One interaction at a time.
It's a long-term approach.
It is, but they believe it's the only way to create lasting change.
I can see that. Now, speaking of groups who have faced historical oppression, another area where the Baha'i community is doing a lot of work is in championing the advancement of women.
Oh, yeah. That's a key part of their teachings.
I know the Baha'i Faith teaches about the equality of men and women, but how are they actually putting that belief into action?
They're doing some incredible things.
Like what?
Well, for example, they've established schools and educational programs.
Okay.
Specifically for girls and women.
And where are these schools?
In parts of the world where they have limited access to education.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is, because education is such a powerful tool for empowerment.
It is. It opens up so many opportunities.
And they're not just focusing on external efforts within their own community.
Yeah.
Women serve on elected councils.
Okay.
They lead devotional gatherings.
And they play an active role in all aspects of community life, so they're really living out that equality they preach.
Exactly, within their own structures and practices.
That's really cool.
And they're also working to advance women's rights in the wider society.
Oh, how are they doing that?
They advocate for policies that support women.
Okay.
And they partner with other organizations to address issues like domestic violence and gender discrimination.
It's really inspiring to see them using their faith to create positive change.
It is. They're making a real difference in the lives of women and girls around the world.
Okay, so we've talked about race unity and the advancement of women. What other areas are they focusing on?
Another key area is promoting sustainable development.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It is. It's one of the biggest challenges facing humanity today.
It is.
And the Baha'i teachings really highlight the interconnectedness of humanity and the natural world.
So it's not just about protecting the environment for its own sake.
Right.
It's about recognizing that our well-being is tied to the well-being of the planet.
Exactly. They believe that environmental protection is not just a good idea.
No.
It's a moral obligation.
So we have a responsibility to care for the planet.
We do.
And they're not just talking about it.
No, they're actively involved in environmental initiatives around the world.
Like what?
They've planted trees, cleaned up polluted areas, promoted sustainable agriculture.
Wow, so they're really getting their hands dirty.
They are.
It's great to see that they're not just sitting around talking about it.
They're taking action.
Yeah, and those individual actions, when you multiply them across a whole community, they can really make a difference.
They can, and they're not stopping there.
Oh, what else are they doing?
They're also advocating for policies that protect the environment
Okay.
and promote sustainability.
So they're working on multiple fronts.
They are, yeah.
Grassroots action and influencing policy.
Because they see environmental stewardship as absolutely crucial for the well-being of humanity.
And that really highlights that core Baha'i principle, unity.
Yeah.
The idea that we're all part of one human family sharing this planet.
And we need to work together to take care of it.
It's about recognizing that our actions have ripple effects.
They do.
What we do to the environment, we ultimately do to ourselves.
And to future generations.
Yeah, and that sense of interconnectedness, that's what drives all their efforts.
To build a better world.
Whether it's promoting race unity, empowering women, protecting the environment, or working for peace and justice.
It all stems from that core belief in our shared humanity.
It's a powerful message.
It is.
Especially in a world that feels so divided and polarized.
It does offer a vision of hope.
A vision of what's possible.
A vision of a world where unity and harmony aren't just dreams,
but achievable realities.
Exactly.
And it's a vision that we can all contribute to.
In our own way.
By embracing those principles.
Of unity, justice, and consultation.
We can all play a part in building a better future.
For ourselves, for our children, and for generations to come.
That's a beautiful thought.
It is.
And I think it's a fitting note to end our deep dive on.
Thank you for joining us on this journey.
It's been an incredible learning experience for me.
I hope our listeners feel the same way.
I hope they've been inspired to take action.
To apply these principles in their own lives.
And in their own communities.
Because ultimately, that's how we create real, lasting change.
It starts with each of us.
Taking those small but meaningful steps.
Towards a more just, more unified, and more peaceful world.
Well said. And with that,
I think it's time to wrap things up.
Until next time.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep striving to make the world a better place.